This podcast is brought to you by iWatch Security. iWatch Security. Get the savings and service that you deserve.
What started this conversation between you and I was like when I came out on Facebook about the Trump judgment. And people like I haven't been on Facebook since. And not because I'm afraid, I just don't want to listen to their crap, right? Like I came out with my opinion and I was respectful to those that disagreed with me, as respectful as I could, but when they start calling me like delusional, or somebody said, "What happened to you, Alan?" Somebody said, "Oh, I guess you just haven't been keeping up during all your travels." No, actually, when I was traveling, that's when I actually had time to look at stuff because I wasn't busy running around, and I had a chance to actually look at other stories and go, "Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense to me."
The truth is, adding value will never go out of style.
All right, recording in progress. How you doing, Alan?
I'm doing great, Brian. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for joining us for a podcast here today. And I say us, it's you, me, and hopefully an audience more than 4 if we're not getting censored. Just to give a little bit of background, we've known each other for, I would say, roughly 15 years. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right, yeah.
I wouldn't say we're BFFs, but I would say there's I'm going to speak for me. There's a ton of respect that I have for you, and certainly your professionalism as far as what you do for a living. I know you know your business.
I appreciate that, Brian. The respect is mutual. I know you know your business. I've always enjoyed our conversations, and you're right. We're not BFFs, but like I know I can reach out to you, and you can reach out to me, and we can always have a conversation. And I know if I'm ever in the area, I can meet you for lunch. Like I know we're like that, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
casual.
And here's the thing: we were actually talking a little bit about this before we started recording, and my thought was, hey, let's get on video and talk about this. Just no reason to delay. You and I, we've had political discussions, let's say 10 years ago or 11, 12 years ago, but it was conversation. It was never name calling. It was never, it's more like, okay, Alan's a sharp guy. He's an intelligent human being, and I trust that he's got a good heart. So if he sees something different than me, I'm interested in that perspective. Does that sound?
Yeah, no. I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Like I always like to hear other people's views, and like back in the day when we were running the same social group, and that group we would talk about politics and stuff, and there was me and a couple others that were in the minority, right? But I always had respect for the people that had a different viewpoint than me. And I think that's what's always been great about our country, but we're just not like we have lost that as a culture, where you're almost, and I think part of it is, and I don't want to get like in a race too much, I guess, but like part of it is this whole syndrome of, as a white male, we're supposed to feel bad for ourselves. There's never like we're not supposed to be prideful anymore. And I think, and that's really sad. Like I think anybody, no matter what your race, what your religion, you should find something to be proud of. And people shouldn't tear you down because you have pride in whatever it is. Pride can be a bad thing, right? Like it's a sin at the same time, but be proud for what you stand for. And nowadays, I feel like what started this conversation between you and I was like when I came out on Facebook about the Trump judgment. And people like I haven't been on Facebook since. And not because I'm afraid, I just don't want to listen to their crap, right? Like I came out with my opinion and I was respectful to those that disagreed with me, as respectful as I could, but when they start calling me like delusional, or somebody said, "What happened to you, Alan?" Somebody said, "Oh, I guess you just haven't been keeping up during all your travels." No, actually, when I was traveling, that's when I actually had time to look at stuff because I wasn't busy running around, and I had a chance to actually look at other stories and go, "Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense to me."
Yeah, well, you're jumping right into the meat. Let's back up a couple steps.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
now, here's the thing, just a little bit of background. Your career is an attorney.
Yes, yes.
And
I
defense attorney specifically. You mind going into your history and how long you've been doing it and that sort of thing?
No, not
Criminal
at
attorney,
all.
what have you?
Hey, absolutely. So I started off. I was an undergrad. I transferred from Appalachian to Boone or to NC State because I knew I wanted to go to law school, and I was having too much fun at Appalachian State, to be quite frank with you. And I knew the grades were dropping, and I had to get out of that environment. And so I transferred to NC State. And originally, I wanted to be a cop. My father was a police officer. I've had a lot of respect for the law. I had this whole, I wanted to be like DEA, right? Like go in and do undercover stuff. And at the time, the woman I was dating, who eventually became my wife and the mother of my children, and this is a fair opinion, she was like, I don't want to be married to a cop. And I get that, right? Like I get that.
Tough life, yeah.
It's a hard life. And
Yeah.
so I was like, so what do I do from here? And that's where law school came up. And I went to UNC. Um, graduated, passed the bar, took my first job as a prosecutor in Wake County, and worked there for 3 years, and then got recruited out of that and went to defense work, and did defense work basically from 2000 to 2022, I think, is when I retired and moved to Puerto Rico.
Okay. So obviously been practicing law for a long time.
Yes.
Not calling you out there for your age, but
I am old. It's okay.
yeah. But that being said, it's like this is your field of expertise, and it's not that you have all the answers. You know, there are plenty of people that would have a difference of opinion, but I'm interested in your opinion in part because, and I hope you don't mind me putting this out there, but I know you voted for Obama twice. I know you voted for Hillary, and then if I'm not mistaken, you voted for Biden in 2020.
I did.
Okay.
I was a full-on Democrat. But I didn't consider myself liberal, right? I consider myself moderate. Like,
right.
I like a lot of Democrat policies, and part of that is because at least I like to think of myself as a good person. I care about people. I get along with people, and there are still some issues. Although I would describe myself roundabout conservative now, Republican. Well, to the extent the Republican Party even exists anymore.
Sure.
But that's how I tend to vote. But I do still have issues. Like I'm concerned. There are liberal issues or like world issues that I'm concerned about. Like I think our healthcare system is a complete mess. It is a complete wreck. You know, and I saw some of that when I was traveling. I broke my arm in Fiji, and it cost me $350 US basically to go to the emergency room, get X-rays, a cast, and Medicaid. It was like dirt cheap. You go to the US, even with insurance, you know, an ER visit, you might wind up 10,000 out of pocket with deductibles and stuff. So like there are problems that need to be fixed, and I feel like as a good country with a lot of smart people, we should be able to fix them.
Sure.
But I'm way more conservative on a lot of other things.
Well, the thing I would encourage anybody listening to this is take off your Republican hat, take off your Democrat hat, your libertarian hat. Let's just talk about something, because anytime you try to put someone into one of two categories, there's all kinds of outliers. There's all kinds of things we're going to agree and disagree with. So I think when you get into this, and I saw you experiencing this on that post, which anytime you start to have a difference of opinion that some other people, all of a sudden, or you say I'm leaning voting this way, it doesn't mean you agree with somebody 100%. It doesn't mean you're part of a cult following and you've drank some Kool-Aid in Puerto Rico or something. That I think we have to get away from that. And personally, I would just say that there's a farce of Republicans and Democrats. To me, it's more like uniparty versus citizens and solutions. That's the way I see things now.
Oh, you're 100% right. Like, and I don't think any of them care about the regular people, right? It's the elite taking care of the elite. I mean, you just even look at fundraising right now, right? Like you get or rallies. You get Trump goes to Wildwood, New Jersey, and it's out of the park, and they're all regular, normal people, right? And even in our social group, I wouldn't say we were all regular, normal people, right? A lot of the people in that group lived in a higher socioeconomic status. We all did, like it just is. But a lot of them were pro-Trump policies. And even when I wasn't, I was looking back going, these are smart people. These are people that have a lot of money. They have nice houses. They have good lives. And they're not, everybody wants to put Trump supporters in with the deplorable category that Hillary hit, right? Like we're a bunch of hillbillies. We live in the woods, and I was guilty of this. Like I was always telling people, "Oh, Trump only won because all these people came out of the backwoods who have never voted before." And I feel so terrible about making that. Like I feel so awful about doing that, right? But that's buying in. Like that's what they do. They get us turned against each other, and I think it makes it a lot easier for them to do what they want to do when you have everybody screaming at each other. We're too busy screaming at each other where we don't really focus on the real issues. And
No,
that.
no doubt. And there's context with everything, right? So,
Yeah,
so let's say that some people did come out of the backwoods to vote for Trump. I could see that,
yeah,
and and that's okay to say that. But if you, to try to fit everybody, to try to fit a Democrat, well, I've got plenty of Democrat friends, to try to fit them all into the category that they're taking over downtown Seattle, flipping genders and creating Chaz. Like that's not fair, right? There's a, when you block people into two categories, there's a whole lot of people that don't necessarily actually relate to each other on a lot of levels. So the thing that I wanted to have this podcast mainly to kind of focus on, and then I'd love to talk about your change since I've last seen you, because I can't tell you how many times over the last 4, 5, 6 years I've literally thought to myself, I wonder what Alan would think about this, because I did respect your legal expertise, and I did respect your heart about things and that you care for people. I know that about you. And so, it's one of those things where if I see it a certain way, okay, I'm curious if Alan would see this particular topic the same way, or am I reading the situation wrong? Do I not have more context to help me better understand the situation? And I can honestly say I haven't seen some of my, let's just call them Facebook friends or Democrats, for lack of a better word. I haven't seen them this excited since the Russian collusion hoax. That, let's face it, Hillary Clinton was fined, the DNC was fined, the Department of Justice was complicit in that hoax. Like, there's a whole lot that went into that was just very. If we're being a principled human being, there was a whole lot about that was very un-American. It was very, in my opinion, a threat to democracy, because they were putting this narrative out there that was just flat out fake, and they knew it was fake. And so, to me, when I'm seeing these events, I'm looking at it from the scope of, this is kind of the same story happening again. And then it was the Hunter Biden laptop, and then it was like, it's always some noise rather than, are we getting to the solutions that the people of this country really want to see, or is it just a bunch of noise again? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the actual, and I know you weren't in the courtroom, and I know that information is limited about the whole outcome, with, let me just shut up and let you kind of talk. And I sent you these questions ahead of time,
yeah.
or thoughts about it ahead of time, just FYI, so everybody being very transparent about all this. But I want to hear your organic attorney thoughts about all of this,
Yeah, sure.
specifically the Trump conviction.
Where would you like me to start?
I just, I'd like to say I know enough to know where to start, but I'm just going to defer to you and say that if obviously we can't talk for 5 hours about this, but
Yeah.
I'd love you to just kind of maybe pick the maybe 5 to 10 things that stick out to you the most, either for the credibility of the conviction or against the credibility of the conviction.
So, as far as the credibility of the conviction, as of where I'm at this point, and again, there's the lawyer talk. And you've touched on this. I'm not an expert in New York law, not an expert in election law. I'm actually, according to the state bar, we're not even North Carolina. We can't even call ourselves experts. But from 20 plus years of practice, mainly in the realm of criminal defense, and I wasn't like, I did traffic tickets. I'm not gonna lie, we all did in that profession. But I handled a lot of major felonies. I did murders, I did rapes, I did drug trafficking, and I'm talking jury trials. And so the first thing I looked at were the indictments. And it's actually, I've started, it took a while. I was angry for a couple of days before I kind of like turned my anger into like something positive. And I've now, the transcripts are out there. You can find the transcripts of the trial. And so I've started kind of doing a deeper dive in that. So I can read word for word what was said. Now, due process has always said one of the tenets of due process is a defendant is put on notice of what he is charged of. And of course, we've all heard these talking points. What was the crime?
Right.
And like when you look at the indictments, and indictments can be tricky. Like I get it. The state doesn't want to put too much information in an indictment. They don't want to play their hand too much, but you at least have to know what you're charged with. And all 34 indictments like have this language right here where it's like the defendant in the county of New York and elsewhere on or about February 14th, 2017, with intent to defraud and intent to commit another crime and aid and conceal in the commission thereof, made and caused a false entry in the business records of an enterprise, to wit, an invoice from Michael Cohen dated February 14th, 2017, marked as a record of the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust and kept and maintained by the Trump Organization. That's just one count. And again, the focus is it's based on another crime, and they don't even tell you what the crime is. Like, really, and they didn't have to do a whole lot here. They could have said in violation of New York Code this,
Right.
which is a felony. And I guess the reason they didn't say you keep hearing federal election law violations is because they don't have the jurisdiction to prosecute a federal crime. That lies in the U.S. courts, not in the New York state courts. So I don't even know how they get to use federal election law. And then when you talk about that, and again, I haven't gotten to this part in the transcript, but this seems to be a known fact reported widely in all media that Trump was going to call a witness, right? He was going to call, I'm terrible with names, but it was a guy who basically wrote the current federal election law on the books. And there's nobody else that can explain the federal election laws that you can't put up a New York investigator because he's a New York investigator. You got to have somebody from the Fed to explain why he didn't commit anything that had to do with federal election law. Yeah, did he pay a porn star? Yeah, he paid off several people, and that's what politicians do. It's
Right.
what
Well,
even non-politicians that are important do. Celebrities do it. Like a non-disclosure agreement is what lawyers do.
so
And
here's the thing, Alan. Let's call it hush money, which is like a negative term in my mind. It's not illegal to pay hush money.
no, it's not.
It's not illegal to pay someone for an NDA. Okay. All right.
The job I'm currently working, I had to sign an NDA. And every job I've worked, like, because I'm doing document review down here in Puerto Rico, just kind of kill the time because I don't know that I was quite ready to retire yet, believe it or not. But like, so it's very low stress. I'm not dealing with criminals and their moms or their baby mamas. And so it's a lot more relaxing. But all those document review jobs, when you're working for big corporations, you sign an NDA. And the payment you get is your job, is like, your hourly pay or your salary, however you're paid. These happen all the time. And the U.S. Supreme Court has frequently said it's a First Amendment violation to suppress an NDA. It's free speech. The only crime would have been that, as I understand it, if Trump had reached into his campaign kitty to pay it off, which he didn't. He used his own money. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Michael Cohen also raised some money, some of which he stole, and, to use this. It's a complete just sham. And what really gets you there is we're talking about they took a misdemeanor, and the only way they could get past the misdemeanor statute of limitations was to turn this misdemeanor into a felony, which is exactly what they did. And, when you see people celebrating the convictions, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on or what your beliefs are. There's nothing that, I learned a valuable lesson a long time. I don't celebrate in someone's downfall. I might not like them, but I don't celebrate in their downfall. And particularly when you're talking about a president of the United States, like we have now politically prosecuted him without a doubt, right? Because when he lost, this just sat around. And Alvin Bragg, when he got elected, at first he said, I'm not going to do anything with this. Cy Vance wouldn't do anything with it. The feds wouldn't do anything with it until
two DAs passed on it already, right? Prior.
yes. Yes.
Right.
Well, Cy Vance and initially Alvin Bragg. And I think I don't know if there was another DA, but Alvin Bragg initially passed. And
Right.
then when he saw, I think what happened, like really what I think happened is he got a talking to, right? Because we know the federal government's hands are all over these state cases.
Sure.
You take New York, the civil case with Letitia James. Actually, I'll take that one back because I don't know how much the feds were involved. I don't have any doubt, but I haven't done because it's a civil case, kind of outside of my area of what I deal with. But like the criminal case down in Georgia, we know that Fanny's boyfriend, what was his name?
Yeah, he was going up to DC. That's documented.
Yeah, DC, and he was because he billed for it, right? He was getting paid mad money. He's
Right.
a divorce lawyer. He had no business in a RICO. Like I don't even know that well, all lawyers were a little egocentric. I probably could handle a RICO case, but I'd be terrified of a RICO case just because they're so big, right? Like, and there's so much evidence, and yet this guy who just happens to be lucky enough to be dating the elected DA in Atlanta gets put on the job, and then he's up in DC, and now they've kicked him off the case, but her office is still allowed to prosecute it, which seems just and the feds are all over that case. Feds are all over New York. You got Coangelo, and I get it. I'm not going to say he took a bad job. He's high up in the New York prosecutor's office, but isn't it funny? He's the third ranking guy from the DOJ, and he winds up in New York on the prosecution.
Right.
Or you take Marchant, and who's got the Bannon case? He's got the Trump cases, and as I understand it, the way they do it in New York, like Marchant, he's just a regular judge. He's not even like a senior judge. He's just a regular. So in North Carolina, it'd be the Superior Court. In New York, they call it the Supreme Court. That's their high level trial. But he's just a regular judge, and yet he magically has wound up with all these cases. Yet his daughter, right, is a fundraiser for Democrats, has made tons of money off this trial. She hates Trump, and her father, the judge, has given money to anti-Trump things and has donated to Biden. Like it just smells. It just smells.
It doesn't pass the sniff test. I mean, to common sense, and if you to think these are legit prosecutions, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you have to say all those things they don't impact the situation. Can you really say that?
Yeah. No, it blows my mind. Even the liberal mainstream media, you take, and I think we talked about this when we touched base on doing this. Fareed Zakaria. I don't know if you are familiar with Fareed. I actually even now, I like Fareed. I think he's a smart guy, and I respect his opinions. I don't always agree with him. Most of the time I don't. But he was coming out along with a lot of other talking heads going, oh, this is a terrible trial. Like, there's no way, right? Everybody was convinced it was going to be a mistrial or an acquittal. I thought maybe mistrial. I didn't think any way he was going to roll completely out of there. But they won 34 charges. They went undefeated. They did what the Patriots couldn't do in a terrible case. I hate to make the sports legal analogy, but like it's hard to go perfect when you're dealing with a big number, like 21 or 34, and especially when everybody's saying there's no way. Like I would have felt better if it had been 17 guilties and 17 not guilty. Like it just seemed like the stars lined up in the worst possible way. How does that happen? Like it doesn't make statistical sense. Like if you look at it, I've tried cases that have multiple charges and didn't, the client still got found guilty, but I won some of the charges. Like it's really hard to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in a bad case, 34 charges. Like the math doesn't math.
Yeah, I've heard it said that judges are supposed to be assigned these cases randomly, and somehow this one judge ends up with Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and I forget the other guy, Weisberg, something like that. Alan Weinsberg or Weisberg,
Yeah.
something like that. And it's like, so one judge in the small little city of New York happens to end up with all these folks. And that just doesn't smell right. It doesn't pass the smell test.
No,
So when
not.
I've heard a few things when I've heard that they didn't allow many things in this case, that if you're really seeking the truth, why would you not allow the guy who wrote the law, why would you not allow him to testify?
It makes no sense.
Okay.
Or the fact these are complex cases. Now it's within a judge's it's within his
Purview.
discretion. Yeah,
Discretion.
it's discretion to let in copies of the jury instructions when they go back to deliberate. I've had cases where judges don't allow that. It's pretty rare though. Like I think it may be out of over probably tried 150 jury trials in my life, if not higher. And maybe on 5 of them, a judge said, I'm not going to print up jury instructions. They come in here and ask if they have questions. And none of them were like complex like this, right? Like you don't let in, like that's going to help a juror. But when you start talking about the jurors, that's another thing that gets me going. I've had people say, oh, but he had a jury of his peers. And I'm not even going to go where most people go on this. They're like, he's in New York City. It's like, it's blue. They hate Donald Trump there. I don't know that all of them hate Donald Trump. It doesn't matter about that, right? Your idea is, I mean, I've tried plenty of juries where my client didn't have a jury of his peers. Normally it's like, I have an African-American client and I got 12 people from Cary that work at SAS. Not really his peers, but you do the best you can. That's how jury selection works. But it doesn't matter if you have an impartial jury if the judge is making rulings that keeps the jury from seeing the big picture or everything, right? At that point, the judge is really running the show because he's determining what the jury sees.
Right.
And I get it. We have to have that because there are things that are not allowable under evidence. And so the judge does have to make those rulings. But when you look at like how many times he sustained prosecutors' objections compared to how many times he sustained defense objections, it's not even close. Like everybody that was in there watching, when you would watch live reports, people would say, well, maybe not CNN one saying this, but at least the news outlets I use were like, man, the judge seems to rule for the prosecution on every question. Every question. Like it didn't even look fair from from what I've gathered inside the courtroom. And again, like I'm still in my early stages of going through the transcript, but the whole thing just stinks. It stinks.
So let me ask you
And
this, Alan.
yeah,
Somebody, let's say one of your peers that disagrees with your assessment. What are they saying? Are they people that have actually, do you think, have actually looked into the details? Because there's a lot of details. It's a complex issue. Do you think they've actually looked into it, or do they want to believe the headline?
I think they want to believe because of the headline. I don't think any rational person could look at the facts and what's been out there if you do a deep enough dive and not at least have some questions. I get it. If you do a deep enough dive and you say, I think he's guilty, I can respect that. Right. It's like, I don't know how much time you spend on X, but like sometimes you see something and you want to go repost it or comment on it. And I'm guilty of this sometimes. I go to do it and Twitter goes, you didn't read the article. Are you sure you want to post this? Right. And I think, and I'll be like, damn, you're right. I didn't read the article. I just kind of read a couple of blurbs. And I don't know if you ever had that experience on Twitter, but that's what everybody does in the real world nowadays anyway. Nobody, I think, that has voiced opinions with me have actually done a deep enough dive to not at least have a question. Like literally, I had a lawyer tell me, and a lawyer that I respect, we're not actually talking right now because I didn't like the way he came at me on Facebook. But literally, he said, all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, I can assure you. And like to me as a criminal defense lawyer, I don't trust anything the government tells me. And even when I was on the left, like I've seen the government do wacky things in court or do things that didn't pass the smell test, and that's in Wake County. like on local things, right? Like
Right.
like what makes you think that in a national, an important national trial, that the government won't cook the books?
Right.
Like like if they'll cook the books on a local level over some stupid things, you don't think they're going to cook the books when it's important or they deem it's important? Like, there's no way.
Yeah. And
And
how I think about it, when you've got, because ultimately, and I'm sure we'll get to some of this when we're talking, but when I think about getting control of trillions of dollars, getting control of the largest military in the history of the world, getting control of the largest, the federal bureaucracy of the most employees in history of any one organization, you start getting control of all that money and all that power. That's really what's at stake for me. And so don't,
oh,
when I look at all the transgressions that I already know of that have been committed against this one guy, it's not about him anymore. It's about a larger picture in my mind.
absolutely. And that's what got them all upset in the first place, right? Trump came in there not speaking presidentially, right? He was like,
Right.
yeah, like Twitter used to give me the most anxiety back in when I was on that side of things. Like I'd read his tweets and I'd be like, oh my God. But then when you start looking back at your life, right? And you're like, wait a minute. Like we didn't have wars. We didn't have the southern border invasion we have going. Like Pride Month still existed, and I don't have a problem with that, but I just don't need it in my face all the time, right? Like I just don't like go live your life. I'm kind of libertarian. I don't care if you want to dress like a girl, but don't tell me I have to accept it, right?
Right.
Like I don't have to believe like you can become a girl or like, and that was another thing that I was like, this place is like this is all over this is not what I voted for, right? I didn't vote for any of this. And when you look at, you talk about they're prosecuting Trump, yet they won't prosecute Biden. Amazingly, Hunter's being prosecuted, and now the laptop is in evidence, and there's no legal question that it's his laptop.
Right.
But it's not even just not prosecuting themselves. You look at the things they prosecute Trump for hemmed up misdemeanors, yet Columbia University gets run over by protesters, a lot of which weren't even students. I believe 100% in our right to peacefully protest, but that wasn't peaceful, right? The and you get, they shut down highways. That's terrorism. I'm sorry, that's terrorism. That's what terrorists do. Everybody thinks blowing shit, sorry, blowing things up is terrorist. That is terrorist. But when you start shutting down like normal services and people can't get out and move about. That's what when terrorists blow up stuff, that's what they're trying to do. They've now figured out a way to accomplish the same thing without blowing anything up. And they don't get prosecuted. You get grandmothers who are protesting abortion. What that 75-year-old woman just got 2 years in prison for protesting abortion. It's gotten so out of control. Really, all they prosecute is if you're conservative. That's what I feel nowadays.
Well,
And
I think most of us would agree that what we want, whether you're on the way I see it, Alan, is you've got 80, 10, 10, right? And so most of us in the 80, we just want it principled. If what's good for you is good for the other side, just a level playing field. I think that's what we're all striving for. And I just think, to your point, they're pushing these extremes to where, there's a guy going to jail because he made memes that impacted Hillary's election
yeah.
loss. So you get a guy that made memes that's going to jail, but Hillary uh, used, she paid that FEC fine because she paid for lawyer information that she had written off as advice. Anyway, she did something legitimately wrong and paid a fine for it. Nothing happens to her, but a guy making memes is going to jail. That doesn't add up.
No. Yeah, I remember that. I think that was where he said get out and vote on Wednesday. And it was really funny. And like,
It is funny, and the guy's in jail.
yeah, and I don't think he even made the meme. he just reposted it. And it's like, what? Like, what has happened to our friend? Like, that's pretty funny. Like, and again, at that time, I was a Hillary voter and I thought it was funny. I was like, oh, this is
Right.
pretty good.
Yeah.
But it also shows they don't have a sense of humor.
Well, it's to me, it's to me, what I've, again, from my perspective, and I hope we're not jumping off the actual conviction of Trump, and I hope I'm not taking you away from that, but it just seems to me like ever since, I would say, starting in 2016 for me, I feel like more and more people are awakening to it's not Republicans and Democrats, it's uniparty versus people. It's this higher level agenda, and they're trying to pit us against each other for everything, whether it's race, gender, sexuality. Math is racist. If you're a patriot, you're racist. If you're a Caucasian, you should be like all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, enough of that. We're Americans. We are the most diverse country in history. It's like we're not without our flaws as a country, but no country is.
No.
And so I just think they're trying to get us distracted with all this nonsense. Overall, to divide and conquer, I think that's the overall strategy. But Trump is truly. It's kind of cliche. It's like they're coming after me, but I'm just standing in between them and you. And to me, that's becoming more and more clear as all of these things happen. And it's just complete unprincipled type things to where people, I think they are feeling if you bend your principles, it's worth it because this person is so bad.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I personally, I don't think it takes away from the talk about the conviction, because I think it's really important when you look at the motivation of prosecuting crime. And if you're not going to prosecute everybody equally, right? Like which is not what they're doing. That's
Right.
when we start seeing lawlessness, right? When
Right.
you don't prosecute, there's a jury instruction that sometimes read in North Carolina. I'm not going to get it exactly right, but some of it is like, we should all feel like the laws apply to us all equally. Like, you can't apply to this guy this way, but we're going to apply to this guy a different way because it's the same law. That's the whole point of having written laws and having precedent. You got to treat everybody the same, and it's just not happening right now. It's almost like they want us to like get so mad that there is a civil war, right? Like, it's almost like they want that. They came out with that movie recently, Civil War, which I was actually all excited to see, but then I was told that the lead hero is the hero because he kills the president. Like, who are we talking? Like, what is that movie really talking about, right? Like, they want us to. I really feel that, and people are like, no, they would never want to do that. Why would they want to do it? Well, again, it's the military-industrial complex, right? Even a civil war makes somebody money, right?
Right.
Like I was just listening to a podcast today. Like, it was the Sean Ryan. I know you sent me a Sean Ryan. I don't know if this was the one, but somebody else, or I'd seen it. Like, it was a Sean Ryan and Tucker Carlson, and it's a great podcast. Like, it's just great. It touches on a lot of life issues, not just politics. But they were talking about Halliburton and what they did in Iraq. Halliburton paid for, like, basically Halliburton, which was Dick Cheney, paid for a whole city. Like, Sean Ryan was like, and of course he's a vet and he's a SEAL and he's done all this stuff. He's like, they paid for the bathrooms, they paid for the people that clean the bathrooms, they paid for the streets. It was all Halliburton. They cooked us our meals. They made how much money? That's what Iraq was all about. And I know this sounds so deep level conspiracy, but is it conspiracy when you start seeing the pattern, right? Like,
It's over and over again. It's you go back to the lying about weapons of mass destruction. I mean, and again, that started under Bush. If we want to cross political lines, and Bush and Dick Cheney and Colin Powell,
mm-hmm.
who I once thought very highly of, and these people that lied to us then. And you're right, it is a pattern. We spend all of this money, and then to tear it up, and then we spend all of this money to rebuild it. $2 trillion in Afghanistan. What did we get? A stronger Taliban?
Yeah.
20
Who was
years
on
later.
X? They were verified on X, but Trump got kicked off.
Right.
Taliban had a blue check mark, and I think they may still have it. The Ayatollah
Probably.
Khomeini had a blue check mark, right? Like, but yeah, we're going
Yeah.
to shut down Trump. We're going to shut down stories about the Hunter Biden laptop. We're going to shut down stories about COVID. We're going to shut down all these stories. That's your government at work. And what they pay Twitter like $3.5 million?
There's 3 million bucks. So let's touch on that real quick. So a lot of people may not know this, the Twitter files, which when this is, by the way, if you're watching this, if you start to see Elon Musk getting demonized like they did to Trump, this is why. It's because it's a crack. It's a crack in the military industrial complex. It's a crack in the government propaganda to where they are losing control of the information. So a few days before, like 4 days before the election, Joe Biden's out there using this 51 intelligence agent, former people saying that the Hunter Biden laptop had all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. We should all know this by now. But the FBI had proactively pre-bunked the story because they knew it was going to come out because they had had the laptop since 2019. They knew it was real. And all of these folks come out saying it's disinformation and this and that because they knew, more importantly, the garbage that's on that laptop. You know, Joe did meet with Hunter Biden associates. They were getting millions of dollars. All this stuff that's on there, it's real.
Well, and what a lot of people don't realize about the laptop story, and this is real easy to look at. Like, it was the New York Times, a liberal rag, that came out with this story, right? Like the liberal Bible came out with this story, and the government's like, we got to shut. And so what they did with Twitter is they're like, we're going to shut down any link to this New York Times story. So people are only going to see it if they look at the New York Times. And but it was so much bigger than just that. Like, we're talking anti-vaxxers were getting shut down, and I'm talking about doctors who were citing peer-reviewed articles that were
Right.
anti-vax, and they got shut down. And they brought the receipts,
Yeah.
And
Or you
they
could
were
say anti-COVID shot is what I would say. They may be pro-vax,
yeah.
for the polio vaccine, something that's, got a safe, time-tested profile that works. So it's to your point though, coming back to the political side of things, what's the difference between Russian propaganda shutting down the people that want to talk about freedom and the American government literally censoring us and violating our constitutional rights?
Yeah. Well, people just don't even realize like the depth of, everybody was in the government. Like, you got CIA, you got the FBI, even Adam Schiff contacted Twitter and was like, I don't like this reporter. Can you like shut him down? Like, that little worm, Adam Schiff, like, who in the big scheme of things isn't really that important.
Right.
Like, he's calling Twitter. Like, everybody was calling Twitter going to take this down. And thank God Elon released that to Schellenberger and his crew. We still don't have any idea what Zuckerberg was doing with Facebook or Google or Instagram, right? Like, those are but you can rest assured that they were all getting the same stuff. There's no way.
Yeah. Well, Zuckerberg did say on the Rogan podcast that the FBI basically told him, essentially take it down. It's Russian disinformation and all that kind of stuff. And Zuckerberg's told that on the Rogan podcast. So we know the government is actively violating the Constitution while they're projecting on somebody else that this guy is going to destroy democracy. No, you're destroying democracy by you're destroying the republic. You're violating the Constitution. That's the Bible of the way things are supposed to be.
Exactly. It's the First Amendment for a reason. It was like basically the founding of our country. That's why this is how our country became a thing, right? Because everybody came over on the Mayflower because they were being prosecuted because of their beliefs and what they said against the king. And of course, we got taxed on tea. And it all starts with the First Amendment. There's a reason it's the First Amendment and not the 10th Amendment.
Right.
And there's a reason we have laid out the amendments we have. And to me, it's always been the most important one. Even when I was a kid, like, I read a term paper one time on Al Gore his wife, Tipper Gore, when she was doing the music censorship. And that infuriated me as a high schooler. And I wrote this big whole long term paper about censorship. So it's kind of like it's always been a passion issue for me. And
Well,
a
it
lot of
should
people
be.
don't know that. Yeah.
It should be. And listen, I've had things said about me because I was outspoken during COVID, and I've been pretty outspoken about a lot of things. And oh, let me listen to the security guy about medical stuff, and it's like I was right. Do
Yeah.
they come back and give me credit for that? No. But that being said, it's like I'm all for free speech. If someone is committing, I want someone to think about this that doesn't like hate speech. I'm all about, let's say you got on here and you started ranting some anti-Semitic thing. I would want to know that's your mindset so I can disassociate with you.
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. And the answer to hate speech is better speech, not
Yeah.
censorship, ever.
I listened to the podcast there. It was a PBD, and they had the Thomas Rousseau on. Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
And I didn't like a
Love
word that guy
PBD.
said.
PBD's
Do what? Yeah, he is. I've learned a lot watching that show. And I really respect that show because he covers both sides of it, right? And like before we got on, I had started the debate between David Smith and Cuomo, and it's
uh,
fantastic. But you know, oh, I lost my train of thought. Where were we? I was talking about PBD.
talking about Russo.
Yeah, yeah, like that guy. Like I still think he's a Fed, but even if he's not, like he's just like he's not what I believe in, right? Like he's like we can't have a black president because only whites are truly American. I personally, I do think the guy's a Fed. He came across because he comes across really likable. You're listening to it, but you also know what he's saying appears to be wacko, but he's very likable. He looks like a Fed, just like Ray Epps looked like a Fed. Like I have spent tons of my life as a defense lawyer around cops. I've represented cops because I used to do back when I was practicing for the Police Benevolent Association. I was one of their on-call lawyers. So if a cop shoots somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning, they get investigated criminally. They get the right, so they're entitled to a lawyer. So there's some of us that are on that. It's not free. We do get paid, but it's not huge
Sure.
pay. But you go out and you represent the cop. And so I've been around lots of cops. And if you don't think if you've been around cops and you look at Ray Epps, you're like, this guy just doesn't seem right. Like he doesn't seem like the rest of the crowd. He's too clean cut. He's in shape, and it's the same with this Thomas Rousseau guy.
Well, and he's ex-military. I mean, that's common knowledge. And here's the thing: it comes back to what we talked about, the smell test, right? So this guy is the only guy on video, January 5th, talking about storming the Capitol. We got to go into the Capitol. And he gets let off with a slap, and grandma who walked through the place is in jail for 2 years. Like, how does this make sense at all? Other than he's part of the machine.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
it's
what that said to me. I could be wrong, but that's what it screams in volume to me.
I have this game on my phone. I admit I'm not always the most in-depth guy, and I'm not always looking at Trump stuff. I do play video games on my phone occasionally, and I have this game called Plague Incorporated. And you design a plague, and the idea is to kill the whole world off. That's how you win. But it's got this news ticker that goes across. Is it showing your plague travel across this world map and stuff? And there's these little ticker things, and they're when I first started playing it, they were like and they're still very ludicrous. Like, but now you start reading them, and you're like, Jesus, that sounds like the real world. Like that's how ludicrous our news cycle has become. And you
Right.
read it, and I'm like, the world is becoming this video game. Like just in terms of we are it, which is ridiculous headlines. Because they'll have something like, I can't even think of one right now, but you're like, it's clearly a joke in the game, but now I'm looking at it going, when did the joke become real life?
Well, I just saw something about spiders are making their way to North Carolina, and I just literally saw something about the measles outbreak in the United States, and it's like, to your point, it's like you almost have to ignore that stuff now because they're trying to get our attention. They're trying to keep us occupied with this nonsense while they rob us blind, which is why we're $34 trillion in debt and adding $1 trillion every year. They're robbing us, they're stealing from us. And you can go back to the Bible, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? And ultimately, I believe behind all of this is money and power. And we talked about this yesterday when we spoke, and I might even try to get my video guy to throw this in here, but when I think about the country that I grew up in, and I used to think about America and freedom of speech. And, I've been feeling like we've lost a lot of that. And then I go back and I actually start thinking like, wait a minute, maybe I just thought I grew up in that. Maybe I just didn't know. And then when you really start researching things, we spoke about this, Eisenhower said on his farewell speech, I really think every American should see this. His farewell speech, he's warning. This is the last thing Dwight Eisenhower is saying to the American public. He's warning us. He's warning us over the control of the military-industrial complex. And what happens? The next president gets assassinated, who clearly, if you know ballistics and you've researched this at all, there were two different shots fired, two different types of weapons. And, they've declassified the CIA and all this stuff, but they won't release it. So how long has it been free? The Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag that started Vietnam. You start really going back to this stuff and start thinking, man, maybe I grew up in a bit of an illusion, and the cracking is starting to happen to where I think a lot of us are waking up to, hey, this isn't just Republicans and Democrats. This is like government propaganda, tyrannical control as they're stealing from us at the expense of all humanity, because 200,000 Ukrainians, dead for what?
Right. Yeah. No good reason. And I actually have kind of a unique perspective. Well, no, it's not unique, but my girlfriend, my partner, she's originally Russian. She moved here when she was 10. Her mom obviously is very, very Russian. And, from the get-go, she was like, look, it's all the same people, basically. Like Ukraine and Russia, and I've seen, I don't know how true these are, and I've never talked to her about it, but, Ukraine was a construct. It was always Russian property. And but the Russian people as a whole are fantastic. Is Putin a jerk? Yeah, he is, but Putin's not entirely wrong on a lot of stuff either, right? And I hate to say that, but I like you came from, I had pride in this country. I grew up, I was a Boy Scout. My dad was a vet. He went to Vietnam. He did time in Vietnam. He didn't come back the same, and that had a major impact on my life. But I was taught things like, you love the flag, you love this country. There's a few songs in this world that can give me chill bumps when I hear them right. And one of them is Silent Night. Whenever you go to midnight mass, a good rendering of Silent Night will give me chill bumps, maybe bring a tear to my eye. And the other is the national anthem, which evidently we're not even supposed to have pride in anymore, right? But I believe in this country. I love this country. But I'm starting to wonder, is it all a construct? You talk about these false flags, and why are these things, if there's nothing to it, why have they not been declassified? Why has the Kennedy assassination not been declassified? Why, the Gulf of Tonkin, 9/11 even, and I used to think 9/11 conspiracy people were just crazy. And then you start kind of looking at it and you're like, well, maybe not, because this is what started the whole Afghan and Iraq thing. And when you see
the Patriot Act.
Yeah, and the Patriot Act and FISA and all those
the intelligence agencies.
And how much money has TSA gotten out of all this? It caused TSA, and I hate TSA people. I just they're like security guards, right? They have this, I want to be a cop, but I'm just TSA, and they screw with you every chance they can. And I can't stand them. But I didn't know about Building 7 and the video out there where the lady says Building 7's down, but it's clearly standing there, and 30 minutes later it's falling down. And I'm like, yeah, I came across that recently. It might have been you and Steve Baker talking about it. I don't remember, but I was like, oh my God, what is this? And you're not supposed to say those things. And when you say them or you notice them, and Tucker Carlson's actually said this, he's like, they attack you. And if
Right,
we're really seeking truth, why are they attacking me for just asking a question?
right. They don't attack flat earthers,
No.
but you wonder you wonder how building 7 came down, which a lot of people don't even know. You start referencing the structural engineers that did a paper about how that should not have come down like it did, and you start wondering, and then you look at, to me it's like, well, what came from that? Well, government grew, government expanded, budget was unlimited, Patriot Act, FISA Court, all of these things that have led to these higher problems that we're seeing now in government, and it expanded government. So one could conclude maybe that's what many people wanted to happen, you know.
Well,
uh, and this is still fresh, but when, I don't even know if I want to say it, but it's just like the whole thing with Hamas attacking Israel, and they just came right through the gates and they shot all these people up, and horrific. I'm not saying it's not. It seems like they got through pretty easy, and that's just, it makes me scratch my head a little bit.
oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at that, and look, I'm on the Israel side of things with this, and I'm on Netanyahu's side, but let's just face it, he was on the hot seat, right?
Right.
And
Before
and
all
then
that happened.
October 7th happens, and they probably have the most protected border in the world because everybody around them wants them dead pretty much. And so they'd see a mouse approach that border wall. How in the hell did Hamas, sorry for the profanity, how did Hamas pull that off? Like they should have been like the guy in the little whatever that air thing is, whatever you call those. He should have been like they should have never gotten across the border. They should have been taken down with missiles or whatever. I mean, they've got the Iron Dome. How did this happen?
They can shoot
And,
rockets out of the air, but they don't have these guys on, golf carts and parachutes.
yeah, yeah, like that
And
doesn't even
again,
make sense.
it just it makes me wonder. I like to say that you have to be able to critically think these days, because a lot of people don't, right? And why was I never concerned about taking a jab for COVID? Because I looked at the data and I looked at, I'm not at risk. Give it to me. I don't give a shit. And I got it and I got over it and I never had it again. So I looked at the data, but I'm open-minded to information. I'm able to
Yeah,
say, you know what, I had that wrong, and shift gears. And there's nothing wrong with that. And when I see that situation over there, and I'm really not educated enough on the topic. I was listening to Dave Smith on Rogan's podcast talking about it. And it's one of these things I'm mildly curious in, but I just feel like we're so overwhelmed with so many issues right now. I think what people need to learn is you need to find people that will deep dive into subjects and come up with a good, rational perspective about something, so you can condense it and you can have an opinion. And if I've got 8 guys that I listen to, or gals, or whoever you want to say, and they all kind of agree, 7 out of 8 agree that something is there, and I don't want to do the deep dive, I can have a somewhat educated opinion about something, but they better have a damn good track record. And it better not be Don Lemon. It better not be Fauci or these people that have been just lying to us. Rachel Maddow telling you, get the jab, it dies, never going to spread it. Like, if they're wrong like that bad, they don't get any more credibility. You got to learn to cut these people off.
you're absolutely right. I got the jab, I got the booster. I still caught COVID like a year later, and I was sick as you know what for like 2 months. And I was like, why did I even get this jab? Like, why did I do this? And like, if I
Well,
could go back in,
go ahead.
if I could go back in time, I'd undo it. I'm diabetic, and my diabetes is pretty much under control. But at that time, I was buying into the like, I'm in a risk class, right? Like, I'm diabetic. Like, I got to get this. And I really wish I had.
Well, here's the thing, and I don't necessarily blame people that did. Like,
Yeah,
I can understand where a lot of people were coming from. The experts were telling us to do this, where we now know it's the experts that weren't censored were telling us to do it. We know that they omitted a bunch of information, and a lot of people were doing it because, like, my uncle got the jab because my grandfather was having health issues and he thought he might not be able to fly and go see my grandfather who passed recently. And
Sorry to hear that.
there's a lot, thank you. There's a lot of good people with good hearts and good intentions that took these shots and boosters that, to be honest, it pisses me off even more that they were lied to, and I feel bad for a lot of people that were misled. If you feel good that you took the jab, good, I'm happy for you. But if you're starting to realize, like, man, I got lied to, I was listening to these folks, that these institutions that are supposed to be protecting us, now I've got more information and they weren't being honest with us. And you have every right to be pissed off, but just own it. Just be honest about it.
Well, and it's not just the vaccine, it's like what they did to us, right? Like they locked us down. You couldn't go to the hospital to visit your loved ones. Like my girlfriend, she had a major surgery during COVID, like a major surgery, like on her neck area. We weren't dating then, but like she had to go to the hospital by herself. Her mom couldn't come in. Like, what they did to the kids. That's just wrong, right? What they did to the kids.
They're
And
not at risk.
and they're not at risk.
Not at risk. They're just not. They never were.
And even Fauci is like, yeah, the masks and the 6 foot apart, like it didn't really work.
It
Like,
just
yeah,
kind of
but
appeared. It just kind of appeared.
yeah. And really where I go with this, and this will drive a lot of people crazy if any of my friends that are on the other side of things watch this, I purely believe now, looking at things, COVID was a political construct. Was it there? Yes. Did the Chinese do some shit? Yes. But I think our government said, hey, wait, we can lock everybody down because we got to get rid of this Trump guy, and we'll have mail-in ballots and we'll have drop-off ballots, and candidate Biden can he can do his rallies from his basement and not have to go out in public, and this is going to help the cause. And now all of a sudden we're getting reports now of bird flu, right? And it's an election year. We have, there's going to be something that locks us down, I feel. And it's not because I'm crazy, it's just because we've seen this, right? We've seen it already. We saw it last election. And the government, I feel, saw what they could do with COVID mandates. And so now I guess we're trying to, let the WHO be in charge of all this, which is, basically it's just the UN version of the doctor's office. And they're looking to control everything and be able to tell sovereign countries when they need to follow this pandemic protocol they have. And this is not an original idea, but I did hear somebody say, like, why do we even have like a NATO and a UN now, right? Like, especially NATO, like there's no longer the Cold War. That's what NATO came about for. There's no longer the Cold War. Yeah, sure, we got Russia and Ukraine doing their thing, but that's not a Cold War issue. That's two countries, and they're killing their population base over there. Like they're running out of like. We've just gotten so damn backwards. I just don't even know what to do now. I'm glad, that we're down in Puerto Rico, because if things really get bad in the USA as far as like a civil war kind of thing or terrorists doing stuff, like I feel pretty insulated down here. Now, however, if there's another pandemic, we are screwed down here because they're still wearing their, like, Puerto Rico was like when shutdowns were going. Puerto Rico was insane down here. Like everything was locked down. You couldn't eat out. You couldn't do anything. And that continued longer than most places. And so, there is that, but I'm not getting another shot. I'm not wearing a mask ever again. If that means I'm stuck at home, that means I'm stuck at home.
It's interesting to me, Alan, is I don't know that they could play that. I don't know that they could do that again. I think it's going to be a different version.
I agree.
I do think you're right. There's something. Joe Biden is so mentally deteriorated. He can't read a teleprompter without butchering it and saying pause at the end and stuff like that. Like he's so mentally deteriorated, and it's so obvious they're propping him up and he's a puppet, that my point of view on this is they're going to have to replace him in the next 30 to 60 days, but they'll do it to where it's just the elite choosing who's going to do it and not the Democrat Party, because they don't want to give you that kind of time. And then this is where I think you've seen Gavin Newsom running in the background, who's got the slick lawyer haircut. He's, very sellable. He's very well spoken. He can debate. Patrick Bet David will tell you, like, this guy can sit there and smile at you and talk to you and make his case as well as anybody. Even though he's destroyed his state after he destroyed San Francisco and things like that. And I was born in California, by the way. So I think they're going to have to replace him. And if they don't, I don't think it's another pandemic. I think it's some kind of, if I had to make a prediction, Alan, I'm going to say that there is a solar flare or a quote Russian attack. One of those two things is going to knock out our electrical grid. There will be martial law. You got to hold off on elections. By the way, they just did this in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
They just pushed the elections back, seeing how it would work there. So I just believe if they don't replace him, it's because they're not going to let Trump walk into office again. They're not going to do that. And I don't know what that means. I just think that we all, even whatever side of the conversation you're on, all of us have this anxiety about this year. What the fuck is coming down the pipe?
Yeah, it's like we all know, right? Like we just don't know what it is. And I agree with you. I don't think it'll be a pandemic, but I do think they've started putting out the bird flu stuff as like a feeler. Like, how are people going to react? Let's see if we can get this out here. Let's see if we can do this again. And people have already been like, nah, yeah. So that's not going to work. But they might try to tie it in with something else, right? Like, so if you get a solar flare or an attack on the power grid, and then you throw in bird flu, right? Like, you can get, like, you got to, like, I don't think pandemic will be the main one. It might not be at all, but like just throw all the spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks, right? And like I do have a bad feeling, and I think you're exactly right about getting rid of Biden. Did you see the clip? I think it was from today, like at the Normandy thing, like where he was trying to sit down before it was time to sit down,
or he's pooping his pants or something. Like there's something going on there.
Yeah, but even that, like when it was done, Jill got him out of there, but I think it's because she had to. He didn't even like go and shake
soldiers or anything.
Yeah, no, Macron did. And
right.
Like I got to give Macron credit for that. Like I don't like Macron, but like he did it. Like he played the part. Biden was out of there. Like I think you're right. I think 30 to 60 days. And God, please don't let it be Gavin, because Gavin is just, he terrifies me. Like I think he's like the Antichrist because he's so pretty. Like he's a pretty man, right? Like and all the crazy.
Smooth.
I shouldn't say
very smooth.
Yeah, he's smooth, and women are gonna love him. And I'm not saying women just go on looks, but there are a lot of like left liberal women out there are gonna be like, oh, he looks like Matthew McConaughey, and I like what he says. And again, they don't do the deep dive. Like I was just out in California back in February and March, and and I've been out in California before, and like for the world's 5th largest economy, supposedly, it sure is like it's just a cesspool, right? Like we were up in San Francisco, and I did see people injecting drugs. I did see, and in all my years, I've never seen just used syringes laying around the street until I went to San Francisco. And LA is the same way, right? You got these overpasses that are just tent cities, or like you hit these side. Like I remember driving and hitting a side street trying to get somewhere, and I was like, oh, I don't need to be on the side street because there's like more tents than I've ever seen at a Boy Scout jamboree. Like it's insane. And part of the problem with San Fran, I've been actually kind of working on this too, reading a book about it. And it's because they've decriminalized everything, and people are intentionally going out there because they want to live in the wild, wild west, and they want to do fentanyl, and they want to do heroin, and it's just an open air drug market. Like you hear guys say, like I'd go to Pill Hill, like that's where you go to get your diazepams or whatever you're buying. They have different areas in the Tenderloin where where you can get your product, and nobody's doing anything about it.
Well, to me, that's not compassion. You're watching these people destroy themselves, and that's not compassion. And I do give a lot of liberals credit for that. I think that they care about people, but I think when you, the way I've always thought about it, Alan, is like, I dealt with a son that had battled with drugs, to be honest. A lot of people won't know this, but at some point I had to cut him off, and I had to tell him, no, I'm not helping you out. I'm not bailing you out. You're gonna sink or swim. And that was tough love. And if I would have kept being there and helping and this and that, I would have been enabling the bad behavior. And I think that you got to have tough love if you actually love. And now he's doing great. And he battled his way out, but he had to hit bottom, and I had to let him scrape. And that was tough. And to me, that's where you can have compassion, but then there's a point where you got to have boundaries and tough love. And you love them enough to tell them, I'm not going to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm so happy to hear you came out on the other side. And you have to do that. Sometimes compassion comes in the form of being tough. It just is, right? Like, and it's like when you punish your kids, when your kids are young and they do something bad and they didn't really mean for it to happen, you still got to punish them, right? Like, they have to learn, and that's being compassionate. You have to learn, like, you can't do that. And like, I can remember my dad was abusive, and that was part of how I grew up the way I did. And he got that in Vietnam, but I do also remember times when he wasn't abusive and I did get punished, and he would come in and he'd sit down and he'd talk to me and explain why I got punished to make it make sense, right? Like, you can't make it look like I'm just being vindictive and I'm being a jerk. No, I'm doing this because I care about you. And maybe my dad wasn't the best example to use on that, but that's really, like, I did the same with my kids. Like, I wasn't abusive, but like, didn't do the same that part. But like, I would tell them, like, that you can't do this. And
You go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
yeah, that was it. I was like, but you have to show them. And it's the same, I guess, it's the same with the homeless, right? Like, this book I'm reading is a Schellenberger book. I think it was called San Francisco, and I'm not done with it yet. But there are some people out there that say you shouldn't even make treatment mandatory as part of a criminal sentence. And I'm like, no, you absolutely should. Maybe it doesn't work because you're forcing it. Because at the end of the day, somebody has to get sober because they want to get sober for themselves. You can't get sober for your kids, or that can be a reason that can fall in the reasoning, but it can't be the sole reason. You have to want to get sober because you want to do it for yourself. And usually what comes with that is, like you already said, you got to hit the bottom. You got to know, oh my God, like, what am I doing here? And until you hit that bottom, there's no reason for you to get sober, right? Because, like, people abuse because they're trying, whatever it is, they're trying to get away from it. And it's not always like because you were born into a bad situation. Maybe it's just you have issues where maybe you don't think your self-worth is very much. Well, drugs and alcohol help that, right? Like, everybody feels better when they've had a couple shots or, do a line of cocaine, whatever, because that's what the drugs do to your brain. And you have to get away from that so you can develop a healthy respect for yourself. And I think that's what happened with me personally. Like, I got away from everything when I came to Puerto Rico. And I had even in getting sober before I came to Puerto Rico, I had a chance to like explore, like, learn myself and learn who I am and understand it's okay to have, like, to be sad here and there, or it's okay to be angry, but you can't let that define who you are. And when you're in active addiction, a lot of times you do let these negative feelings define who you are. And then you have to turn to the substances to get away from them. It's like this non-ending circle. And so sometimes it takes getting locked up. Sometimes it takes, like, getting put in a hospital because you had the DTs or whatever. You got to go through it to come out on the other side in some form or fashion. I'm not saying like everybody's got to go to AA or whatever, but you got to find the heart, right? And find where you're in your comfort zone. And then it's good.
Well, it always comes back to me. If you can't control yourself, someone else will control you, and that's society. And that's where there's boundaries. If you steal, drugs, crimes, I can't just go take my neighbor's car because I like it. There are laws to prevent against that sort of thing. And if we abuse these laws and we don't respect these laws, my biggest thing with the border, by the way, is that we have laws on the books. It's the president's job to enforce those laws. That's his job. And if you get a certain group of people that are picking and choosing laws they want to follow, well, what's to stop me from start to pick and choose laws I want to follow? And what you have is anarchy, and we can't have that as a society. And right. So this is why this topic is actually so important right now, about this whole court case, because if laws are being perverted, we already know Joe Biden is ignoring our border laws, and they're doing it for whatever reason. Some people might say it's compassion, but I don't actually feel that that's the case. It would be easy to change the laws and let more people in and improve the immigration system. And some of the nicest people I meet are from other countries. I happily export a bunch of liberals I know and bring in 10 immigrants for some of these liberals I know.
Yeah.
So, that being said, we just have to have laws that we respect the law and we all abide by the law and we're all getting same treatment under the law. Otherwise, we don't have a country anymore. So
No.
I'd be real curious to hear if you stay interested in this and keep going through that. I would love to see if you ever end up having discussions with people who maybe think you're part of a cult now, or you've drank the Kool-Aid or something because you're kind of pro-Trump now. I'd be curious if they would ever go through the transcripts, and then you go through the transcripts and you have a conversation lawyer to lawyer and have that intelligent conversation about that high level stuff, and to see if they're able to say, you know what, I can kind of see where you're coming from, Alan. That was kind of nonsense. Or maybe they make the case to you to where, damn, I didn't know that. I didn't know about that election law that they're applying or what have you. But I agree with you on the surface, super stinky, and with the backdrop of all these other atrocious things that have happened.
Well, it's like we say in the law, you got to look at it in the totality of the circumstances, right? It's just not Trump. It's just not this Trump trial. You got to look at the big picture, at everything that's going on to really understand. You can't. It's like what I see the running jersey up there. It's like if you're watching hockey, right? Like, and you're just watching. I'm not a huge hockey guy, but I do like hockey somewhat, and I've been to enough games. I've sat on the ice, and that's really cool, right? Like, it's a unique perspective.
Right.
But I've always maybe the 200 level tickets, right? Like where you're up high and you can see the whole game develop and you can see a whole play develop, or like any sport, like football, same thing. Sometimes when you're up high and you watch what's actually going on instead of just being on the field and looking like at the guy that's against the ice or up against the glass and you're pounding it. But that's really all you're seeing. But when you're up high, you're like, wait a minute, I see this guy going around over here, and I think he's gonna, and then it happens, and you're like, any sport like hockey, football, basketball, soccer, any of that, like, and it's the same with the world, right? You gotta have the bird's eye view, because if you're down on the ground, you're not necessarily seeing everything. And I think even like Steve Baker was talking about that on the podcast about January 6th. Like he said, he was talking about when you saw Ray Epps retreat and he had the quadrant, like I forgot, stack, the military stack escorting him out. I didn't even know that. But the important part of the story was he didn't know about it till he looked, till he panned out, right? And panning out is what we all got to do. And, pan out and look at the sentencing for Trump 4 days before the Republican National Convention. Really? He couldn't put it after the convention? And I think he's going to, I don't know if he'll lock him up, because I think even they know if they put Trump in Rikers, that's when the war starts. Like, I don't see that not turning to violence in the streets. I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying people will be extremely pissed. But also, even if that doesn't happen, it jumps. Like, I think Trump going to Rikers, game over, Biden. Game over. Whether or not we actually get to vote on Trump because they do something stupid. But if he goes to Rikers on June 11th, means he's not available for the Republican convention. And I'm already hearing talks. They're trying to get Nikki Haley possibly in there, which would be a disaster. She is just one of them.
Well, Nikki Haley would be no different than Gavin Newsom, would be no different than Joe Biden,
None.
Would be no different than Kamala. It's just these people are puppets for the machine. And, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, you could put fill in the blank, Mitt Romney, who I voted for, who I absolutely can't stand now. He would have been no different than Obama. It would have been the same guy. And so, that being said, I just encourage people to start having conversations with each other. Like I'll see a post like something on Facebook, like, how could people vote for this guy? Well, have you talked to anybody that's voting for that guy? Have you taken one circumstance or one thing when, like Michael Rappaport, the actor, coming out talking about how, you know, one of the things that he built his hate of Trump on was the whole good people on both sides, and how
Yeah.
that was completely taken out of context. It's that times 180 things that it's easy to keep building all of these things on both ways, on both sides. And we all need to be open to the data and make sure that we're, to your point, seeing things from that higher vantage point as clearly as we can, because we are not the enemies. And the establishment is not looking out for us. I mean, if that's not clear to you, have a conversation with some people that think it's not. Talk to some people that can articulate their point, and just talk about the Twitter files. Pick out one category. Talk about Russian collusion. Talk about the Hunter Biden laptop. Just grab some issues on both sides and dissect it and share the information that you know about it. And you might be surprised what you find, because we're all trying to get to the truth, and I believe most of us want what's right for people. I really believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is. For me, I really like to. I've got a couple of Trump hats on and a Trump shirt, right? And I wear them out, right? Like, and sometimes the joke is, am I choosing violence today? Am I going to put this on? And lately, especially as a conviction, every day I'm wearing it. But what I really like to do is somebody will come up to me and talk to me about my hat, or even if we're just talking, but I'm wearing the Trump hat. I go out of my way to be so completely nice. I'm a nice guy anyway, I think. This is what I think of myself. But I go out of my way because I want them to walk away. Even if we're not talking about politics, I want them to walk away and go, damn, that guy wearing that Trump hat was pretty nice, right? Like, he was a pretty reasonable dude. Like, I have nothing bad I can say about them. And that's kind of how I hope I can change people. It's funny. We went to this really nice resort Labor Day or Memorial Day weekend over on the East Coast. We got a great deal for it. And I was hanging out in the pool and I had my Trump hat on me. And there's this African American guy comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, turn around." And so I turn around, like I'm facing the pool, but I'm not facing his wife. We're both facing the same direction. He's like, "I don't want my wife to see what I'm about to say." He's like, "But I love your hat." He goes, "My wife, not so much." He goes, "But I love your hat." And we start talking. And he owns a trucking company in Arizona. I didn't get his information, but we were just talking, right? And he's like, "Let me tell you, I run the company and I don't really drive anymore because I don't have to, but I do go out a couple of days a week with a load to California." And he goes, "I like getting out on the road." And he goes, "It's a mess." He goes, "I pass past all these border stations and there's nobody manning them. There's no border security. There's no homeland security, nobody. And they're just coming through." And he's like, "I see it with my own eyes." And he goes, "It's a wreck." He goes, "So I'm on your side." And I was like, it was an amazing moment, right? And thank God, I think, Trump doesn't have to get all the African Americans, but if he can get a good chunk of them and just show a statistical improvement, like he's doing really well. And he's already up, I think, like 15 points in the from where he was last election on the Black American vote. And then you see there's a lot of Puerto Ricans down here that are pro-Trump. And you wouldn't think so after Maria came through here and he came and the popular press clip was him throwing some paper towels to people. A lot of people love him down here because it's a little wild down here, but it's also like, as a culture, they're pretty conservative down here. And
I just think I think it's okay for people to want their country to be a better place.
yeah,
And the reality is we've got wars now. We've got, obviously inflation has gone crazy. There are so many things that are, in my mind, coming off the rails. You got a very aggressive China. You got a potentially Iran and Russia, like the BRICS currencies forming. If you think inflation is tough now, wait till BRICS is up and going, which is going to be based on the gold standard, probably overtake us as a world reserve. And that's going to That's going to create even more inflation. Like things are going to get worse before they get better. And that's even with Trump coming in charge, because, you know, there's so much to tackle that that's whoever comes in has a big task ahead. That's for sure.
Man, you talk about inflation, and that's another bone of contention, right? The Bidenomics and how it's working. Back in October, I was working on this one document review job I had. It required me to be on the mainland, and it was just very like temporary, like 4 week gig. And so I went and stayed at my girl's parents' house in Cary. And it was actually really good because they were able to come down here and visit our house. They hadn't been down here before, but because they have a dog. And so I was house sitting at the house watching the dog while they were down in Puerto Rico. And so one night I had to go run some errands. And I was like, I got there's vanilla ice cream at the house. I want to make a root beer float because I got this sweet tooth, which is really bad because, again, the diabetes, but it's under control. So I was like, I want a root beer float. And so I went to Harris Teeter to get a 2 liter of A&W root beer. And before tax, it was like when you looked at how much it was $3.74. And I was like, this can't be right. And so I actually grabbed it and I took it to the restaurant. I'm like, I don't think the price is right. Can you check it? And she's like, oh, with tax, it's $4 or whatever. And I was like, I don't want it. Like, I don't need that for $4 for a damn root beer. And you're going to tell me there's no economy, like it's A&W. It's not even like a really good root beer if you like root beer. Like $4 for this? And you're going to tell me we don't have inflation?
Well, I hope there are some people that feel inflation is getting better under Biden versus it was Trump, and it's just like ridiculous. Like you can do a quick Google search to know that. But any case, I would encourage you, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall. If you could have an attorney that disagrees with you, like get the transcripts. I'm going to read the transcripts, and let's have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's have a conversation over Zoom, and I would love to be a fly on a wall for that conversation. My guess is, based on my experience, Alan, most people won't talk to me if they disagree with me. They won't have a conversation with me. And I'm always open ears, like, hey, let's talk. Let's get on video. I've sat down with people that hate Trump and say he's racist. And then I sit down with them, I'm like, all right, let's talk about why he's racist. They can't tell me. And they want to avoid those situations like the plague. And then I could give them a bunch of stuff Biden's done and said that's pretty despicable. But that being said, it's like, I don't necessarily think he's a racist either. He said a bunch of dumbass shit, and he might have been in the past, but who knows?
Well, yeah. And that's like, I don't think Biden necessarily is a bad guy either. I think he's been used. Like maybe he is a bad guy. Like I'm not going to say he's not, but I think at his current moment, I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he just has no idea what's going on. Like I like it's almost like elder abuse. I actually feel like when I watch that video of him in Normandy today, I felt bad. Like I generally felt bad for him. I'm like, this is just wrong. There's nothing right about this. They're parading this guy around like he's like, it's just like it's sad. And
it's
like
weekend at Bernie's.
Like maybe he used to be evil, but like right now, I don't think he knows the difference between evil and good, and I don't think he's behind anything that's going on. Because I mean, rationally, like my concern, if I were Biden, would be like, okay, we're using all this against Trump. What's going to happen the next true, whether it's Trump or like if Vivek gets it on the next elect, like when a real true conservative comes in here and they decide, okay, it's payback for all the shit y'all did. That's the problem. And that's the big problem with any of this. Once you start this ball rolling, it's never going to stop, right? It's just never going to stop. And I blame somewhat the Republicans on this back in the Bill Clinton days, right? Like it was impeach, impeach, impeach. And ever since that day, like it's been impeach, impeach, impeach. And we're never going to get anywhere good with that. Even like I do believe impeachments are a thing that should happen sometimes, but I don't think that should be our first go-to, but especially like actual prosecutions in criminal courts. I don't see how we ever get past this. Like it's so third world, and it frightens me.
Let me ask you this, Alan. Obviously, they're going to appeal the decision. Could could they stick Trump in jail during the appeal? Is that how that works?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can tell you in North Carolina, most felony convictions that get appealed, you still get sentenced right there on the spot. And you sit there and wait while your appeal bears out. That doesn't always happen. It really depends on the nature of the case. A judge, again, in North Carolina, can keep you out pending the appeal. It does happen. It's very rare, especially if you're looking at time. They're like, no, we're not, because the fear is, this should not be the fear for Trump, because like, where's Trump going to go hide, right? But the fear is like most people, okay, they had their trial, the jury has spoken, they don't like the outcome. Now they're looking at 30 years. They're not coming back to the courthouse. I don't know that I would, right? Like, I don't know that I would for sentence. I'd be like, well, I think I'm getting 30 years. See ya. So that's why. But like, this is one of those cases where you don't have to do that, right? Like, I don't think Trump's going anywhere.
Well, based on this judge, he's going to put him in jail. That's my gut.
Oh, I think so too, or at least a very restrictive house arrest.
Well, I
Right.
don't even think they're going to do that. I think it's going to be jail, and I'll tell you why. And I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I just don't, the whole gag order, just sentencing right before the Republican National Convention, everything lines up with from what I can tell, this judge has done many unusual things, erring in the side of anti-Trump, right? And so why would that change course now? Why would they house arrest him where he could still run his mouth? They don't want him doing that.
No.
And so, in my opinion, they're going to put him in jail, which is going to actually boost his numbers. And they're going to create him into some Nelson Mandela type figure with all of these prosecutions. And then he's probably going to win if we can get there without our electrical grid crashing or Russia and China attacking us or whatever,
Do you think if he goes
swan event happens?
Do you think if he goes to jail, he goes with or without Secret Service?
Well, I think they're going to try to get rid of his Secret Service and something happens to him. And that, my friend, that will be the start of something really major in this country. I have no doubt about that.
That's the only reason I think maybe house arrest, because I don't like I guess Biden could strip him of his Secret Service, but like that I don't know for a fact, because I thought it was constitutional. But maybe Biden does and says like,
my understanding is it's already been discussed as taking away his Secret Service.
It has been discussed.
I've heard that somewhere. I don't remember exactly where. I heard that discussion being talked about.
I've heard of it as a possibility. But I haven't done a deep enough dive to determine whether he actually can. But if he can, because really what he can say is, well, he's a felon now. He's not entitled to it. But you throw him in Rikers with no protection, he's dead, right? Somebody's going to kill him. And that's how they get rid of him, I think. Because like if you throw him in Rikers and he still has a voice or he's still there, obviously he's still going to get the votes. And then there's a whole constitutional question. What do you do if he wins the election and he's in prison? He's still alive, but he's in prison. But you could, like, I don't have a reason to doubt you. I just don't want to believe it's possible. I mean, what's even funnier is the judge actually could give him what's called, I believe I read this. In North Carolina, we call it conditional judgment. You get convicted of a felony, but it's like a first offense. And the judge says, okay, you stay out of trouble for a year, maybe do some community service, drug treatment, or whatever they think you need to do. If you do everything you're supposed to do for a year, the conviction's gone. I think Marshawn has the ability to do that. We all know he's never going to do it, but he has the ability.
Yeah, I mean, he's in my mind, he's clearly a partisan character in this whole thing.
Absolutely.
So to me, everything is going to be worst case scenario, right along in line with your 34-0, with what many people have just a joke of a case in general. So we're going to see what happens. And it's unfortunate if this goes down south somehow and he's taken off the ballot or something happens, because that's going to be the greatest threat to this country outside of anything that I can think of.
Do you know what have you ever heard the term a trial tax? Do you know what that is?
I do not.
It's what we use in the legal world. So the trial tax is usually when you're charged with felonies. And usually trial tax comes about on more serious felonies, but it can be a low level felony. Anything where you can get an active prison sentence. Some felonies, at least in North Carolina, like say possession of cocaine, is just it's an I. If you have an I felony, we rank felonies in North Carolina from I to A. A1 is obviously first degree murder. I is like simple possession of cocaine. If you don't have any record at all, and you get convicted of simple possession of cocaine, it's a judge has to put you on probation. He can't, by law, he cannot. But let's say you have a higher offense, or your record's a little different, and you now have jail time or probation as a possibility, or even if it's just jail time, but there's some range in what you can get. A lot of judges they'll never admit it, but it's called the trial tax, and it's like you either take a plea with a negotiated outcome for the DA's office, or you roll the dice and you put 12 in the box and have a jury trial. And what judges do, if you lose your jury trial, you pay a tax a lot of times for pleading not guilty and making the court and the prosecutor go through all the efforts. And usually what that means is you're going to get a worse sentence. I've literally had judges say, look, does your client know if he goes to trial and loses, I'm probably going to max him out. That's the trial tax. And right. I think Donald's probably going to pay a trial tax. Yeah. And is that right? No, it's not right. Like, you should have your day in court, and you should, like, if you want to have a trial and plead not guilty, you shouldn't be punished additionally. Like, it shouldn't affect the sentencing. But I'm here to tell you, brother, it does in a lot of cases.
Well, we're living in very interesting times, and hopefully cooler heads prevail and laws are followed, and it's going to be interesting. And I certainly appreciate your time and expertise today. Thank you for sharing today and putting yourself out there like that.
Brother, I'm so happy you asked me to do this, because I can put out the message and let people know, hey, look, you want to know my views? Go watch this. So thank you for having me, and I really appreciate it. And just remember, Jesus was a convict too.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for your time today, Alan.
All right, brother.
Have a good one.
Hello, this is Brian Smith, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more valuable content.